Hello and welcome everybody to our author conversation with Keith Taylor. He is a 2025 Michigan Notable Book author for What Can the Matter Be? Hopefully everyone can see this. There you go. A beautiful cover as well as a beautiful book. So we're really excited to get to talk to you and delve into a little bit of your writing process and your poetry. So I'll give you a chance to say hi though.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thank you for asking me, Mindy. It's great to be a part of this program.
Oh man, it's so fun. And also, I just have to say, your office is incredible.
Thank you.
I'm very
Thank you.
jealous of it.
These are the poetry books. So,
Just steeped in it. It's
it-
beautiful.
yep.
That's one thing I've really been enjoying now that we have the Michigan Poet Laureate program under the Library of Michigan. I've been steeping myself in a lot more poetry, and I'm just rediscovering how much I loved it. Like I'd
Great,
forgotten all these years, and
great. Yeah,
your
we
book was
all
a part of that.
good. I'm glad it was.
Yes. But I'll go ahead and we'll get started with our questions today and just kind of talk a little bit more about you and your book and get to know
Great,
everything. Well, not
great.
everything, a lot.
I'll be careful.
All right. Don't worry, we can edit if we have to.
Okay. Hopefully you won't have to do much.
Yeah. Well, first of all, give us a little background on yourself and how you became a writer.
Sure. I am originally from Western Canada, and I am still a Canadian citizen, although I've lived in Michigan for 50 years this summer. Um, my family moved to the state. Well, my family is very religious, for one thing. So
Mhm.
we grew up steeped in the Bible, and particularly the King James version of the Bible,
Mm,
which is Shakespearean language. And as a 3-year-old, I had to start memorizing it. And so, there was a lot of that old language that was in my head. My family moved to Indiana when I was 11, and I was out of place for a little while. I talked funny, had an accent. I'd already imagined myself becoming a writer, but back in those days, you would misspelled words. A certain number of them in any paper would get you failing marks. And I spelled color with a U and neighbor with a U and center RE and on and on and on the list. And so I was deeply resentful of that. Um, and I just looking out my window in South Bend, Indiana one night, I saw the snow falling and um, I felt the need to write about it. And I just put words down. And I took it to school and I was at the end of the alphabet, Taylor, and the guy next to me was a guy named Zart. And I showed Kim Zart the words I just put down on paper. And he said, "You should make a poem out of it." So and I said, "Well, how do you do that?" And he said, "Well, you just, make it look funny on the page." So I made it look funny on the page, and my English teacher went nuts for it. He just loved it, and it was like, "Wow, that's how I get approval. I write poems." So and then I became a poet, and I mean that's fairly early. What was that? Sixth grade,
mhm,
and so that became my life. And then I mean, I sort of became a young snob and quit college and went to Europe because I wanted to live that whole bohemian life. Came back and ended up moving to Michigan in 1975, and that's when I got an education in contemporary American poetry. And
mhm.
I was just thinking Alison Swan, a wonderful writer, was a Michigan notable author a few years back. Um, she was interviewing me, and she said, "Keith, it feels like for you," and she's Michigan, born and bred, and generations, and has all the family weight, the good and the bad that comes with that. And she said, "It feels to me as if Michigan is your liberation." I
Mm,
was kind of like, well, Allison, I think you're right. I mean, I do not have the weight of family here, so everything I have here has been created here for me personally.
mhm.
I met the love of my life here, as I often say. I married a woman from Detroit. I'm married into Detroit, um, and uh, so I mean, it is my study of the natural world, which is a big part of what I do. I had always been a student at some level of the natural world, but anything in depth is here. So very quickly internalized our various landscapes and the flora and the fauna of this place. So that's how I became a writer. And then it's at a certain point in your life, you do this and you keep doing it, and yeah, suddenly that becomes what you, or suddenly, slowly, that becomes what you do. So I mean, it just seems impossible for me now to stop writing. That's how I understand the world. That's what I do.
Yeah. How you process it.
It is how I think. Uh,
Hmm.
so um, that's what I've become. So there's a lot of Michigan landscape, although still occasionally those memories of Alberta and my bohemian years in France. Those will pop up, but mostly my poems are landscaped in Michigan.
I love it. And I mean, I think you've answered the why do you write. It's how you see the world, it's how you think, it's how you process. It is your lens that you see the world and you
Absolutely,
express how you feel. I mean, yeah, that's
absolutely.
powerful.
I mean, maybe in those early days, like pleasing my English teacher in middle school, I did want to get approval, which is why you try to publish. I mean, there's certainly
Hmm.
that you try to get the approval of your peers and of your community, and that's certainly a part of it. But um, you grow out of that. I'm 73 now, so I mean, those kinds of ambitions are not as important to me anymore. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I'm still writing poems, and I just sent a book off to a publisher last night. So
What?
not,
That's so
not a book of poems,
exciting.
a book of prose. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm a little tired because I did stay up later than I intended to. So I'm
It's
still.
always that last minute deadline, right?
That's right. That's right.
I love that. I mean, you've talked a little bit about why you write. I'm curious to know kind of what is your writing process,
Yeah, the
if you
process.
have one.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're sitting down. The book I just sent in yesterday was a prose book, and that process is very different. I mean, you've been given an assignment or you've created an assignment for yourself, and you sit down and do it, and you have to do it. So you can sit down at 7 in the morning with your cup of coffee and start work.
Hmm.
Poetry is a little bit different. Um, there are people who sit down and give themselves prompts and things. I wait for whatever that thing called inspiration comes, and it comes in lots of different ways. It comes from my reading. It comes from my memory. Lately it comes from sitting in my easy chair. Well, this book that we'll talk about soon. I mean, it comes from sitting in my easy chair during COVID, and maybe since COVID has passed, I still haven't gotten out of my easy chair. I have a beautiful backyard. My wife is a compulsive gardener, and there's lots to look at in my backyard. So I sit in my easy chair on the second floor and gaze out over my kingdom, and poems seem to come. Um, and then, I mean, there's the revision process. That's the revision process. So poems can go on forever and ever and ever. I mean, I have poems I've published. There are a couple poems in this book that took me 20, 30 years to write. So the revision process keeps going on, and you keep trying to make it sound right, and you make it shorter and you make it longer, and you change an adjective here, eliminate a comma there. That can go on for an awful long time because it never really ends. So the process of writing poems is you wait for them. The process of writing prose is you sit down and do the work.
I love that. Yeah, the when you were talking about how sitting from your easy chair during
Mhm.
COVID, I mean, reading this book, it was like I was right back in 2020 and 2021. And I mean, the yeah, the just the atmosphere of this book and some of those images of you just sitting in your easy chair looking out at this garden. Yeah, when you were talking about that, I'm like, oh yeah, this is this book.
Yeah. But when I organized the book, I mean, um, so I definitely wanted to start with the COVID. So the title poem and
Mhm.
are the COVID world. And the whole first section, which is called the Extinction Report, um,
Yeah.
is a rather gloomy section. And you wonder, well, do
Mhm.
you really want to start a book in gloom? But I did want to start this one in gloom. And then I try to slowly work out of it uh,
Mhm.
to the end of the book, which I like to think gets even ecstatic. But
Mhm.
so the poems were all jumbled together. The poems were not written in that chronological order. So I had to select the poems, some of them written before COVID, several, not half the
Yeah.
book, a third of the book, quarter of the book was written before COVID. So, but if they fit this sort of emotional pattern that you're looking for, um, the sort of almost societal collapse, and then coming out of it where we all seem to be functioning again, and even have opened ourselves to moments of joy. Um,
Mhm.
that was the line I was looking for. So
It's
yeah,
powerful.
good.
I guess, this is a little bit answers. How did you get the idea for your book?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I
A
mean,
pandemic will do that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, poets often discover the ideas for their books after the fact, after many of the poems are written, um, which is good because it means you're not writing poems to stick them in. I want to
Mhm.
write a poem about this, so it'll make that idea clear, which usually end up being pretty bad poems. Um, but but yeah, it's the idea was there, and I mean that was so pervasive. And even though I was retired and didn't have to show up to work every day, I still do lots of things like this. And I mean, year and a half where we did nothing but Zoom, um, for everything. I mean, how many readings did I do on Zoom? And so I had very little interaction with the audience. It wasn't like one-on-one like we are. It'd be like
Yeah.
25 people on the screen, and it was like, well, what are they doing? And so it changed things. On the other hand, it made me comfortable with Zoom, so now I can do things like this easily. Um,
It's true. So that technological skill, that was something.
it was, and I'm a boomer, so it takes us a while to learn these things, but but it was it was a tough time. It was a tough time for all of us, let alone the families of the million people who died. Um,
Yeah.
so so yeah, I mean it when I found myself writing things that I knew I was writing only because of COVID. So there's that first poem. The second one is
Mhm.
about seeing the tracks in the backyard, and how suddenly what hit me was how suddenly everything became ominous. Oh,
Mhm.
I'd look out and see the kind. Oh, the squirrels are running, the bunnies are running. Oh, is that a fox track? But now it's like, whoa, what is that beast going through? And it's going toward my neighbor's yard. And
Right. Oh, I read that and I was like, the wolf of
yeah, yeah,
COVID, stalking these people. Yeah, it just the dread. You could feel that dread again.
yep, yep. But we came out of it, at least
Yeah.
at some level. We came out of it. I suppose there are some people who didn't. I mean, I know
Mhm.
there are. I have friends who are completely paranoid and who've remained antisocial after COVID. But um,
It's a process.
it is a process. Yes, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, most of us can go through it. Some of us can't.
Yeah. I mean, it's been interesting working with historical collections like we do at the Library of Michigan, and how many times I've come across, a yearbook or something from 1918, right, with the Spanish flu.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just eerie sometimes when you read and you see the connections. And yeah, it is a reminder though that we've made it out before and we'll make it out again.
Yes. Yes. And maybe we already have. Who knows? But
Yeah, right? Yes. Yeah, as you said, I think everybody's kind of at a different stage in that
yeah.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Um,
There, I have
yeah.
no, my desk is steel. So
And we've talked about how you got the idea for the book. Beyond being a poetry book or a book of collected poems, how else would you define this work?
well, there's a fair amount of history in it. I mean, and that historical moment and other historical moments. Um, but again, lyric poems are lyric. The lyric impulse is the impulse of an individual voice. So uh, its history all changed through that. Um, that book of prose I just sent off is called Attempted Histories. So it's like I'm trying to write history, but I really know that my impulse is lyrical, so I'm just going to attempt it. And so that was fun. But there's a fair amount of history in this book, but colored by personal history. And then of course um, I am often when I am often referred to as a Michigan nature poet, which is just fine for me. I don't mind that at all. Some people might resent that categorization, but I don't. So, so there is a good deal of the natural world, which is what is reflected on that cover too. So there's the yellow lines of the road with animals not squished on either side of the yellow lines. But yeah,
Yeah, just reading this, the nature, just you're just immersed in nature throughout this. And I love that myself. I find that just
Yeah.
incredible. And I wish I had the knowledge that you have. And some of the
Well,
images
you're
too
that
were
much
pretty.
younger than I am. You've got another 40 years to get the,
That's true. I got time. I got time to learn.
yeah,
I love too that you described your wife as a compulsive gardener, and I'm like, that's
yeah.
goals for my life right there. If
It,
once I
it,
have time.
it takes a lot of time, and I cannot get her to. I mean, she's a little bit younger than me, but not a lot. But I can't get her to retire because she also loves to work. So she'll be more of a gardener once we can convince her to sell her company and get out there in the world. But right now, it's not happening. But
She's
just
like, not yet. Nope.
no, no, just drove her to work before I came up here to talk to you. So
I just love that. I love that too that you talk about it. It's history. And it's personal history, but it is also, I think about that poem where you were talking about the hermit in the woods.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
also the history of place
yeah,
and how nature, it is sort of a stamp of that history and history of like when you talk about the monarchs, like they're
yeah,
just gone
yeah.
when
Yeah, yeah. That poem, when I read that poem, and that poem has gone off fairly well in the notable readings that I've done in the libraries around the state, I always have to say, no, the monarchs are not going extinct, even though in that poem they are. We still have them. I was just up north last week uh, at Sleeping Bear and saw monarchs all over the place. So the monarchs are
good.
still there, and but it's the population we have to worry about is that Eastern North American migrating population of monarchs.
Yeah.
Monarchs have been introduced essentially all over the world. I saw monarch butterflies in New Zealand years ago when I was there. So the poem is a little bit deceptive that way. The monarch has not gone extinct, not even here. It is threatened, but yeah, it's a um, when history and the natural world collide, and
Hmm.
that is interesting. And we've done, and this state is so good for seeing that.
Hmm.
We've got an essential industrial city um, that went through its devastation and has then gone through its rapid recovery from that. But you had 5 hours north of that, and you crossed the bridge at the Sioux, and you're in the forest in northern Ontario, one of the last major unbroken forests in the world. I mean, it goes from just north of Superior to the Arctic tree line. Um, it's burning right now in parts of it, but um,
Yeah, so your poem about the
yeah,
wildfires in
yeah,
Canada.
I
I
just,
was like, oh, yep, that's
right, right. I mean, I did mention I was Canadian, right? So
yeah.
there is some, yes, these fires are coming from our forest, but there
Yeah.
is, unlike the people who get mad at us for the fires, there is nothing we can do about it. There are no roads. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
It's
and,
pretty remote up there.
you just have to let it burn.
Yeah. I know it's but I
But
love that you're
yeah,
talking about it's a natural history as well.
exactly, exactly. And that's a phrase I've always loved, natural history.
Yeah.
I spent a dozen years teaching a summer course at the University of Michigan Biological Station, which is up about 20 miles below the bridge. U of M owns 10,000 acres up there. They bought it in 1909 after it had been logged, and then they have just essentially been studying the forest as it regrows. It's never been farmed. That land has never been tilled. So the impressions of the native people are still there. The native caches, you can find thousands of them on that property because they were never tilled over. Nobody ever plowed up those fields. And I taught a course called Environmental Writing and Great Lakes Literature there to just sort of diversify. But everybody else was a scientist or an ecologist, and boy, I learned an awful lot from those people, and that was great. So there's a lot of that. There's a bunch of biology station poems in this book. I think I
Mhm.
counted them. Not all of them are obvious, but there's like 10 of them. Um,
Wow.
I was around these people, and these people are not pie in the sky. They understand the threats we are under. Um, on the other hand, they're people in generally really good moods, and I still, after becoming my best friends and spending an awful lot of time with them, I still can't figure out why they're happy so happy all the time, surrounded by all this devastation they study. So I think I
Yeah, I
started that
know.
job when I was in my 50s, and the education just kept coming. Every day I learned something.
That's so cool. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there is something when you can combine, it's the interdisciplinary piece, right? When you can combine science and literature and art,
Yep.
just beautiful things happen.
Yeah. And it's still, I mean, it's the process of that is not that old. People started doing, science fiction kind of stuff at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. But to actually use science and climate science, the Indian novelist Amitav Ghosh wrote a great book about we got to get our imaginative writers to use more science if we're going to hope to enter the imagination of people with climate issues. So it's important. It's also clearly the way my mind works.
Hmm.
I mean, I have been growing up in Western Canada. I was essentially a rural upbringing, so I knew animals and birds and even geology to some extent because it was a farming community. Um,
Yeah,
so
you have to.
that's part of me. That interest is part of me, and to now to be able to put words on it is a good thing. I like it.
It's wonderful. So, I mean, for you, what would be some of your favorite poems or moments of poems?
I thought you would ask this. Okay, so my daughter is now 34 years old, and in this poem, she's 6 weeks old. So you can tell how long it took for this poem to develop. Um, and it's about taking her out into a snowstorm when she was tiny, 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 which was probably a very bad parenting moment. But my wife was exhausted, and I just wanted to get a baby who could break into tears at any time away from her. So I bundled her up, and took her out. Someone had told me there was a snowy owl over at the university, and it was perched in a tree. And snowy owls don't usually perch in trees, so I wanted to see this. So I did, and then 30 years later, I could write this poem. It's called Infant Baptism. When she was 6 weeks old, her mother exhausted, sleeping, and me dumb and clumsy in my fathering, I wrapped her and took her out one late December night in a snowstorm to see a snowy owl perched in a tree like a gigantic, puffy, pure white songbird peering down on us, yellow-eyed, frightened or curious, or vaguely wondering if my daughter might be food when I lifted her toward him. See, see, snow fell on her face and she didn't cry.
Mm. I'm so glad you read that poem. That's my favorite poem
Is it
actually
really?
from
All
this book.
right.
Yeah.
It's
I
my
well
daughter.
I was like I read that and I was just like "Ah, it's
Yeah.
just it's perfect."
Good. Good. Thank you. Glad you like it. Now
Yeah.
that's in the last section of the book, or no, I guess it's in the third of four sections where I'm trying to find my way toward positivity.
You're
Nothing like
finding hope.
right. Nothing like an infant to get you on the road to positivity. Yeah.
That's so true. Yes, I have a 9-month-old
Do
and
you really?
yeah,
That's
so
great.
and well
That's
and a
great.
4-year-old, but
Okay.
so I mean reading this book I was pregnant when I was reading this.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it reminded me of my daughter who was born in the winter of 2020.
Huh.
And he was born late fall of 2024. And so reading this, it
Yeah.
hit me just right.
Good. Yeah, well, and they grow up. My daughter is this beautiful yogi, works with autistic children. She's kind of a saint now, and a beautiful saint. So
Oh, that's what you can hope, right? Is that
hey, that's right. And she still likes her parents. As a matter of fact, after a relationship breakup, she's now living in an apartment 3 doors down from us. So
hey, I
it's
love
good
it.
for us. I'm not sure it's so good for her, but it's good for
Yeah.
us.
Well, listen, my parents live right down the street from me now, and I
Good.
was
Oh,
like,
good.
can I get closer to you now that I have two children?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's that childcare helps a lot.
It's true. I love it.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad, thank you for doing that reading. And
Sure.
I love it too that you talk about how we're moving from that isolation, that dread of the early pandemic where just nobody knew what was going on. And then moving into that hope. And as you say, even like ecstasy or joy.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, you could see that. And it was, I think what really connected with a lot of us who were reading it is it wasn't just like this, the atmosphere of that beginning, you feel it, but you don't stay there, right?
Good, good. Well, I'm glad you read through that first section, so you get over the worst of the gloom. It doesn't get ecstatic right away, but you can see where it's going. Um,
Well, but even in that gloom, though, there's these moments of hope and joy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's clearly that the outside world is still going on.
Hmm.
Things are difficult for us, we
Yes.
Michiganders, we human beings, in the moment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So one of our committee members, her favorite was the poem with the neighbors building a new fence.
Oh, yeah. That's the third part of the book. Yeah.
And they're talking about, look, well, maybe they were weirded out by me with my binoculars out looking at the birds. It's a
Yep.
great image.
Yep. Um, yeah, the fence. So we built our compost right against the fence, which means we can get it. They can't see it, and we're very careful about so they can't smell it. We can move it further away from the house.
You're like, okay.
So we
That
first
was funny.
resented the breakup of the all of these connected backyards, and then later, well, we can make this work. So
There's
um,
something that can come out of it.
yeah.
My question for you, what did it mean to have your work selected as a Michigan Notable Book?
Oh, God. When you write poems, you have a small audience. You know you're going to have a small audience. There's not that many people who write poetry or read poetry. And then there are people who say they're never going to read poetry. And in the middle there, you get people who might own a poetry book or two and will
Hmm.
read some poems before they go to bed and, like poems when, to be read at funerals and weddings and, that part. And that's the group you hope to hit. And the Michigan Notable thing really, really helps with that group. And I mean, it's a recognition of where you live. I mean, it's
Hmm.
um, that people around me I don't know up there in Lansing working for the government liked my book of poems. It's like, wow, that's great. So there's that recognition. The go to go around the state, and when I do when the libraries are asking, I'll go anywhere. So I went, let's see, on your dime, I went all the way to Escanaba. And since I was up
Yeah.
there on your dime, I went and read in the public library in Houghton. And they're going to go back and read in the public library in Marquette in October. So, um, it gets me around to those places. And, you have 15, 20 people in those audiences and you sell a dozen or 10 or even 5 books. And it's like, wow, these books are getting out there. And then you
Hmm.
get the feedback, this is so important to me. And some of that feedback for poetry comes, I suppose it is for fiction too, but it comes years later,
Yeah.
years later, decades later. Oh, your poem meant so much to me. I met
Hmm.
the first reading I gave on your dime was at the Brighton Library.
Hmm.
And a young woman and her husband came, and she's a librarian in one of the branch libraries in Lansing.
Oh.
Never met her before, never had any contact. And she showed up with all of my books. And I got a lot of books, I mean, with the chapbooks and things, I've published like 20 books. And she had the first notable poetry collection. I had a couple notable anthologies, but the first notable poetry collection was from 2006. And she had that with a Michigan notable sticker on it. So it was like
Hey.
very cool. Clearly I have a fan. Who knew? And a fan who's a librarian. Those are fans we like.
Yeah. They read.
They read, right? And they're exposed to other readers. So that was a real. I'd have to look up her name, but she was. I mean, that was great. And the fact that she was a librarian, but I was not in her library, means that she knew about all of this because through you guys.
Mhm.
And so that was a real kick. And then people I hadn't seen before. I gave a reading over in Novi, beautiful little library over in Novi, and a former student of mine from 25, no, more than 25 years ago showed up. Um,
Ah,
and it hit me that, when you have people as your students, even when you meet them when they're bald and gray, you think they're still kids, right? It's because they were my
mhm.
student. And this guy's like 2 years away from retirement. He's a public school teacher in Novi, and he's 2 years away from retirement. I go, Joe,
Oh my gosh.
2 years away from retirement, man. You're still 20 years old. So,
You're
uh,
like, I'm getting old.
yeah. So that's a lot of fun. Meeting new people, finding people, and then expose people. I mean, a lot of the people who are going to go to a library poetry reading are people who are in their writing groups and who are writing, who are whether they're putting their poems out there in the world or not, they are thinking of uh, the importance of an individual voice that are in
Mhm.
their poems. So in many ways, I'm reading to the converted, but not all of them. Not all of them.
Mhm.
It'd be great to read. It'd be great to get past that. I think the poet laureate thing is a good way of getting past that when you put them out into schools. I didn't let my name stand for the poet laureate last time because of the citizenship thing, uh,
Mhm.
because it would be too easy to attack if somebody wanted to attack. But then you guys had a specific thing on there about no matter what your visa situation. So it's like, well, I'm legal anyway. So maybe I'll let my name stand this next time. We'll
You've
see.
been here 50 years.
I
You
have
are
to
grafted onto the vine
There we
of
go.
Michigan.
There we go. And you have not lived in Michigan 50 years, even if you were born here. So
It's true. You've lived in Michigan longer than me.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, maybe I'll do it because and actually I have an idea, which I'm not going to say here because some other Michigan poet might steal it. But I did get a good idea that the of things that of a part of the audience, the Michigan audience that we have not yet hit through this program or through the laureate program. So
Yeah,
think about that
I
for.
think it's a great idea.
I'll think
I
about that.
love it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've kind of talked about who you want to be able to reach out to people who aren't big poetry readers.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's important?
Well, again, I've been doing this all my life, so I think it's important, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
think
right?
it says something. It enters the talk about the human condition in a way that does not always enter that talk, even if it has a small audience. And poetry, other than since Homer has always had a small audience. We're never talking about thousands of people. We're never talking about bestsellers. But it seems to say something about the human condition that is not said otherwise. And I think I'm going to harp on this, but it comes back to that an individual voice responding to moments, either in a much larger context, historical, the natural world, or a personal context. This is my family. These are my children. So that seems to be important to people at some time. Um, and I mean, poetry's one of the oldest arts. So it seems to have been important for a long time in its small way. So I have a friend who's a poet who's one of somebody said to him that remember poetry is a minor art, and I thought about that for a long time, and I go, well, it's not a minor art. Um, Shakespeare wrote in verse. The much of the Bible was, or at least the Old Testament, was written in verse.
Right?
There
You
is
think
poem rap.
Psalms, right? Psalms, right? That book alone.
Right. And people who don't read poems will stumble across a contemporary poem, and that poem will become important to them. There's a wonderful Michigan poet, a little before your time. She died in the '90s
Mm.
as a young woman. She was not yet 50, named Jane Kenyon. And she has a gorgeous poem. You could look it up called "Let Evening Come." And it's just repeated, "Let evening come," and then the last lines are, "Let evening come," something about, "But God does not leave us comfortless."
Mm.
Poem got used in sermons, it got used at funerals, and it's a gorgeous poem. So, "Let Evening Come" by Jane Kenyon. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, and it has not disappeared. People still find that poem. I still see it on people's walls. So,
I mean, I think about, Maya Angelou, a great example of someone who,
exactly, exactly.
I mean, we just know these poems. I mean,
Yep.
even going back to, some of the British
Oh,
poets,
yeah, yeah,
there's,
yeah. People
was it?
quoting poems even when they don't know they're quoting poems.
Yeah, exactly.
Just look at the phrases that have entered the English language from Shakespeare. Um,
Hmm.
and you look through those lists when you see them, and it's like, wow, Shakespeare said that? What was the one that blew me away recently? Oh, the milk of human kindness.
Yeah.
Lady Macbeth says that before she goes off and kills somebody. And how many times had I read Macbeth or seen it performed? 10 times, 8 times?
And
And
you still didn't even remember that.
no, and she says, take from me the milk of human kindness. And she's not talking about feeding babies here. She's talking about getting rid of that sustenance because she wants to go out and kill people. So,
Yeah. Crazy.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I am a convert to poetry, I would say
Good,
too. Some
good.
of it is, yeah, it's just, it's so much in our, we think music, right? How many
Right.
mu different songs? That's poetry. It's just set to music.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's we really are steeped in poetry, but we don't acknowledge it or give it the
Yeah. I
credit
mean,
it deserves.
I think part of that is a problem with our education. I think that people teach poetry with all good intentions, but they don't really understand that you don't have to figure it out.
Yeah. You don't have
Poetry,
to
like songs,
analyze it to death.
right? And
Yeah.
it's not a puzzle. It can you read through once may not mean anything. You read it through twice, and the veils start falling from your eyes. And if there's something in there, some little hook, some phrase that catches you, um, and you go back to it, it becomes clear and clear and clear. And whatever images or association of images is in the poem will start entering your imagination, our imaginations, as we as readers into this thing. So it can happen, but there are not many people who teach poetry well. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's a fault of our education system. I don't know that that's going to get much better, um, but people will still come to poems. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure.
I think a lot of it is our cultural context too. Think very Western,
Yeah,
Enlightenment, we have to figure out how does it work, right? We got
right,
to dissect it. And that's not how, that's not really the point of poetry.
right.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan winning the Nobel Prize was one of the. I was completely tickled because Dylan is my life. I mean, back there in the early parts of the formation of my character, um, but that songs are literature. That
Mhm.
suddenly people have to think that way. Now there were writers, some of whom I know, who were ticked off because Dylan got the Nobel Prize in literature, but I was not one of them. It's like, oh yes, this is literature, and this works the same way as literature, um, and that's one of those things that is perhaps an indication that the barriers might be breaking down. Um, how many people can sing "Blowing in the Wind" and
Yeah.
suddenly think of
A
that?
Rolling Stone.
Rolling Stone, yes, like a Rolling Stone, yes.
Like it is a good connection to one of your poems
It
too.
is. It is indeed. Yep. Yep. And yeah, so there's always hope. Um,
Mhm.
Even here in my poetry section, I have a section on Bob Dylan. So
I love it. Well, I mean, this is a good question too. It leads into which writers or works have you found yourself reading recently besides Bob Dylan?
yeah, do you know Thomas Lynch, Michigan
I
poet,
do.
essayist? Tom's written all kinds of things, and he's had some good. He was shortlisted for National Book Award for a book of essays 30 years ago. I mean, this is a big deal. Um, Tom is publishing this week or next week his first novel
Ooh.
called No Prisoners. And I blurbed it to tell you the truth. So I had to read it, and I was reading it, I'm going to introduce him at the launch of his novel up at the Bear River Conference. So I've been rereading it this week. And it's, for Michigan readers, many of whom know Tom's work, the Undertaker poet, essayist. Um, some of it will be familiar, and some of it will be completely new. And again, Tom's a poet, so it's partly based on his father's experience in combat in World War II in the South Pacific. Um, but he has the father live long past Tom's own father lived, when so much of Tom's life gets combined in there, and then an imagined old age. It's the book is called No Prisoners, and it'll be out end of August, first part of September, maybe mid-September by the time it's in bookstores. I mean, and it's a wonderful book. So Tom's a friend. I've read him for years, um, but that book has been there, and it's just a reminder of what an effective writer he is.
Mhm.
And he's such a part. He's such a Michigan writer. I mean, this is who he is. So I've been doing that, and I went to a reading by a Michigan poet, Greg Rapley. He had a new book out called The Barley Child. Another one.
Oh
Sounds
yeah.
like just Irish Americans, but yeah, because it's about it's a real Irish American book. Greg teaches over or lives over in Ottawa for years and years. He was the lawyer for Ottawa County, and now he's in retirement. He's teaching a class or so a semester at Hope College. Um, but he's just over there working as a lawyer for a county, and in a county where people have been pretty, the politics have been raw, um, and managed to write some poems and has 4 or 5 books of poems. Oh, I'm glad I brought that book up for you guys because you guys should be aware of that for next
Yeah.
year's list. Whether it makes it or not is not up to me or
I
you.
will say both have been, they're on the submission list.
How are they?
I can't remember if we've received both of them yet. I think I'm waiting on
Greg's book you have
Greg's.
received. Tom's you probably haven't received because I'm.
Actually, I did. We got an ARC.
Oh,
We
did
got
you
an
get it?
advanced reader
Okay, good.
copy. So,
Advanced reader's copy for those of you who are out of the
we're-
book. Yeah,
right. So, I mean, listen, every year we get a lot of
yeah,
submissions,
I
and
know you.
it's always exciting to see, I mean, just how talented Michigan authors are. It's just such
We're
a
amazed. We are.
broad spectrum.
There's a big group of writers in Michigan. It's the equal of New York and California. I mean, maybe we don't have quite as many well-known people as those states, but more than most states we do. Um, which is great. I spent a lot of time working with Greek and in Greece. Michigan is physically almost exactly the same size as modern Greece, and we have almost exactly the same population. Now, if we were talking about Greek literature, everybody would be going, "Oh yeah, of course," you know. So that we can say Michigan literature because we're dealing with the same numbers.
Mhm.
Why can't we talk about it? It's great. And you go around Michigan and you realize, oh, there are people in this state who know about me, who know my poems. Isn't that great? Now, that would not be startling if I was a Greek writer going around Greece, right? So,
That's
and
true.
maybe I'm less well known outside of Michigan, but most Greek writers are unknown outside Greece. So, um, it's I don't mind that comparison. In my mind, that is my comparison: modern Greece and the state of Michigan. And we're surrounded
Actually,
by water.
I never thought about that, but it's a good comparison.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it's been so great to talk with you, Keith,
Do, man.
and learn a little more about you and your writing. And I hope this will not be the last time that we have a conversation like
I
this.
hope so. I hope you keep your job and make sure I get another one of these awards. Probably won't be this next book. This next book is too critical, but too it's like
Listen,
criticism.
you never know.
Look
We
after
have a
that.
committee for a reason, so
Okay, okay,
the committee may really love it.
okay. I'll get the publisher to submit it then. We'll do it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Thank you very much.